On February 13, 2025, President Donald Trump signed an executive order to implement a new trade initiative that involves reciprocal tariffs on imports to the United States. This initiative seeks to establish tariffs that match the rates imposed by other countries on U.S. goods, a move Trump described as a means of achieving fairness in trade. The plan is tailored for each trading partner, with an implementation timeline set to begin as early as April 2025. Key developments and context. 1. Objectives of the tariff plan. Trump's administration argues that these tariffs will create a more level playing field for American businesses and help address the trade imbalances that have long troubled the U.S. economy. The initiative is part of a broader strategy to reshape U.S. trade policy and to bolster domestic manufacturing. 2. Background on recent tariff actions. The announcement follows Trump's recent implementation of a 25% tariff on all aluminum and steel imports effective March 12, 2025. This measure affects various key trading partners including Canada and Mexico, which had previously enjoyed exemptions from similar tariffs. 3. Concerns over economic impact. Economic analysts express worries that these new tariffs could lead to a rise in prices for American consumers and potentially contribute to inflation. Scott Lincecum from the Cato Institute pointed out that such tariffs may reflect a misunderstanding of global trade dynamics, warning that they could disproportionately affect U.S. manufacturers and consumers. For expected international reactions, countries like Canada, Mexico, and members of the European Union have indicated readiness to retaliate against U.S. tariff increases. The EU, for example, has prepared countermeasures targeting American goods in response to the steel and aluminum tariffs. Japan has also begun discussions with the U.S. regarding the implications of these tariffs. 5. Predictions for the U.S. economy. There is significant concern among economists that the introduction of reciprocal tariffs may exacerbate inflation and slow economic growth. A survey conducted revealed that a majority of respondents expect these tariffs to lead to higher prices and a weakening economy. 6. Political ramifications. Trump's tariff strategy is perceived as a high-stakes gamble. Rising inflation could diminish consumer support, which is critical for his administration. While the White House suggests that the revenues generated from these tariffs could help address an anticipated budget deficit of $1.9 trillion, it remains unclear how the public will respond to the potential economic fallout. Summary of the announcement. During the announcement in the Oval Office, Trump emphasized his commitment to fairness, stating, "I will charge a reciprocal tariff, meaning whatever countries charge the United States of America, we will charge them." He characterized the existing tariff landscape as inequitable, claiming that many countries impose significantly higher rates on U.S. goods compared to what the U.S. charges in return. Commerce Secretary nominee Howard Lutnick, present at the signing, indicated that the specific rates for each country would be assessed in the coming weeks, with the goal of implementing these tariffs by April 1, 2025. Reactions from financial markets and analysts. The stock market initially reacted positively to the announcement, although analysts remain cautious. Concerns about rising costs and potential retaliatory measures from other countries have created an atmosphere of uncertainty. Despite the immediate market uptick, long-term investors are wary of how these tariffs will affect corporate earnings and consumer spending. Conclusion. Trump's announcement of reciprocal tariffs marks a significant shift in U.S. trade policy with potentially far-reaching implications for international relations and the domestic economy. As the administration prepares for the rollout of these tariffs, both the U.S. and its trading partners must navigate an increasingly complex landscape characterized by economic tension and a potential escalation of trade conflicts. The effectiveness and repercussions of this approach will likely unfold in the coming months, influencing both the U.S. economy and global trade dynamics. The announcement of reciprocal tariffs by President Trump on February 13, 2025 presents several counterintuitive aspects regarding economic impacts, political dynamics, and consumer behavior. Here are some of the key counterintuitive points identified in the content. 1. Perception of fairness versus economic reality. Trump's argument for fairness in trade. Where tariffs match those imposed by other countries seems intuitive. However, the economic reality suggests that such measures could lead to higher costs for American consumers and potentially destabilize the economy. While the intention is to level the playing field, the resulting tariffs may disproportionately burden U.S. consumers, contradicting the notion of fairness by raising prices on essential goods. 2. Short-term political gain versus long-term consumer backlash. The administration may believe that imposing tariffs will solidify support among certain voter bases by appealing to nationalist sentiments. However, this approach risks alienating consumers who may feel the immediate impacts of inflation and rising prices, leading to a potential backlash against the administration. This counterintuitive dynamic poses a risk to Trump's political capital, as voters may prioritize their economic well-being over political assurances. 3. Tariffs as revenue generators versus economic slowdown. The administration's expectation that revenue from tariffs will help address a projected budget deficit is counterintuitive when considering the broader economic impact. Economists predict that these tariffs could slow economic growth and exacerbate inflation, which could ultimately reduce consumer spending and tax revenues, contradicting the idea that tariffs will provide a financial windfall for the government. 4. Retaliation in trade wars versus negotiated settlements. While the administration may view tariffs as a tool for negotiating better trade deals, the likelihood of retaliatory tariffs from other nations complicates the strategy. Countries like Canada, Mexico, and EU nations have indicated readiness to respond with their own tariffs, potentially leading to a trade war that harms all parties involved. The expectation that this could lead to positive negotiations is counterintuitive given the historical outcomes of such trade tensions. 5. Market reactions to tariffs. There is a noticeable disconnect between market reactions and the economic implications of tariffs. Despite analysts predicting negative impacts on growth and inflation, stock markets initially reacted positively to tariff announcements. This suggests a counterintuitive optimism among investors who may believe that the tariffs will be short-lived or not as damaging as forecasted, despite historical evidence indicating otherwise. 6. Higher prices for essential goods versus consumer price sensitivity. The anticipated increase in consumer prices due to tariffs may not align with the current consumer sentiment, which has become increasingly sensitive to price changes following recent inflationary pressures. This counterintuitive situation suggests that while tariffs are expected to raise prices, consumers may be less willing to absorb these costs, leading to decreased demand for goods and services, further harming the economy. 7. Global trade dynamics misunderstood. Trump's administration appears to misinterpret the complexities of global trade, believing that imposing tariffs will lead to equitable trade relationships. However, trade experts argue that this misunderstanding could lead to unintended consequences, such as damaging supply chains and increasing costs for American businesses that rely on imports, which runs counter to the goal of enhancing American manufacturing competitiveness. 8. Consumer versus corporate interests. The expectation that tariffs will bolster American manufacturing overlooks the reality that many American companies rely heavily on global supply chains. A significant portion of manufacturing costs includes imported materials, and higher tariffs could drive up costs for businesses, which may then pass these costs on to consumers. This counterintuitive result suggests that while tariffs are intended to protect U.S. jobs, they may inadvertently harm the very industries they aim to support. 9. Inflation fears versus economic growth. While the administration may downplay concerns over inflation as a consequence of tariff increases, the potential for rising prices could stifle economic growth. The assumption that tariffs will not significantly impact inflation contradicts economic theories suggesting that increased costs for imports will inevitably lead to higher prices across the board, thus undermining growth. 10. International relations strain versus trade negotiation leverage. The adoption of reciprocal tariffs may be seen as a strategy to gain leverage in international negotiations. However, the resultant strain on diplomatic relations could undermine long-term strategic partnerships, leading to more significant economic and political repercussions than anticipated. This counterintuitive outcome highlights the risks associated with aggressive trade policies that prioritize short-term leverage over sustainable international cooperation. In summary, the counterintuitive aspects of Trump's plan for reciprocal tariffs illustrate the complexities and potential pitfalls of such trade policies. While the administration may perceive these tariffs as effective tools for achieving fairness and negotiating better trade deals, the broader economic implications, consumer behavior, and international relations suggest a more nuanced and potentially detrimental reality. The announcement made by President Donald Trump regarding reciprocal tariffs on U.S. trading partners is significant, and there are several key elements within the report that may be overlooked but are crucial for understanding the broader implications of this policy. 1. Misunderstanding of global trade dynamics. One often overlooked aspect of Trump's tariff plan is the commentary provided by trade experts like Scott Lincecum from the Cato Institute, who argue that the approach reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of how global trade works. Trump's assertion that imposing tariffs equivalent to those charged by other countries will create a level playing field ignores the complexities of international trade relationships, where multiple factors including regulations, standards, and supply chain logistics play a critical role. This misunderstanding is significant because it highlights that tariffs may not address the root causes of trade imbalances and could lead to unintended consequences such as increased costs for U.S. consumers and manufacturers. 2. Inflation and consumer impact. The potential for tariffs to exacerbate inflation is a crucial point that many reports emphasize but may not fully analyze. The survey conducted by Yahoo Finance, where 73% of respondents believe the tariffs will lead to higher prices, signals a strong public sentiment about the economic repercussions. The significance here lies in the timing. With inflation already impacting consumer purchasing power, additional costs from tariffs could further strain household budgets, particularly for lower-income families who are disproportionately affected by price increases. This could lead to a broader economic downturn and diminished consumer support for the administration, thereby impacting future elections. 3. Retaliatory measures. The readiness of countries like Canada, Mexico, and the EU to retaliate against U.S. tariffs is a critical element that might be underestimated. While the report mentions these potential responses, the broader implications of a trade war should not be overlooked. Retaliatory tariffs can escalate tensions and create a cycle of economic confrontation that harms not just the targeted industries but also global supply chains and economic stability. The significance of this escalation is that it could lead to a situation where multiple economies are adversely affected, thus undermining the initial goals of the tariff strategy. For customization of tariff rates, the report indicates that the tariff rates would be customized for each country, which suggests a level of negotiation and complexity that may not be fully appreciated. The implications of this customization are significant because it introduces uncertainty into how these tariffs will be applied and which products will be affected. This uncertainty can inhibit investment decisions by businesses that rely on imported goods, potentially stalling economic growth and innovation within affected sectors. 5. Political calculations and risks. Trump's acknowledgement that the revenue from tariffs could help address a projected $1.9 trillion budget deficit is a notable political calculation that suggests a prioritization of short-term financial gain over long-term economic stability. The significance of this approach lies in its potential to alienate voters who may not be willing to accept higher prices for the sake of government revenue. As inflation rises, the administration may find that the political risks associated with implementing these tariffs could outweigh any perceived economic benefits, particularly if consumer sentiment turns sharply negative. 6. Impact on specific industries. The potential impact on specific industries such as the automotive sector, which relies heavily on imports of steel and aluminum, is another critical angle that deserves attention. Executives from companies like Ford have already expressed concerns about the financial strain that prolonged tariffs could impose on their operations. The significance of this concern extends beyond individual companies, as a slowdown in the automotive industry can lead to job losses, reduced consumer spending, and a ripple effect that impacts the broader economy. 7. Long-term strategic goals. Finally, the report hints at a longer-term strategic goal of using tariffs as a means to negotiate better trade agreements. However, this approach may overlook the fact that other countries might not be willing to negotiate under the threat of tariffs. The significance of this is that it could lead to a stalemate in negotiations, further entrenching hostilities and making it even more challenging to reach favorable trade agreements in the future. In conclusion, while the announcement of reciprocal tariffs may appear to be a straightforward policy move aimed at correcting trade imbalances, the underlying complexities and potential consequences are significant. The interplay of economic, political, and social factors creates a landscape where the effectiveness of such tariffs is uncertain, and the implications for both domestic and global economies warrant careful consideration. Understanding these overlooked elements is crucial for grasping the full impact of Trump's tariff policy and its potential to reshape international trade relations. 1. Reciprocal tariffs as a trade strategy. President Trump's announcement of reciprocal tariffs on U.S. trading partners is a significant shift in trade policy aimed at achieving fairness in international trade. By imposing tariffs that match those of other countries, Trump seeks to address perceived trade imbalances. However, this approach may overlook the complexities of global trade dynamics. As critics argue, it could lead to higher costs for American consumers and manufacturers. The tailored nature of these tariffs, to be assessed on a country-by-country basis, raises questions about the effectiveness and implications of such a strategy. 2. Economic consequences and consumer impact. Analysts predict that the implementation of these tariffs could exacerbate inflation and lead to higher prices for U.S. consumers. Studies indicate that tariffs imposed on key imports, particularly from Canada and Mexico, may cost households significantly, with estimates suggesting an annual burden of around $1,200. The potential for increased consumer prices poses a risk to the administration's political standing, particularly in light of recent inflation concerns that contributed to changes in voter sentiment. 3. Political ramifications and global responses. The reciprocal tariff strategy is fraught with political risks, especially if it results in retaliatory measures from affected countries. Nations such as Canada, Mexico, and members of the European Union have already indicated their readiness to respond with counter-tariffs, which could escalate into a broader trade conflict. This scenario not only threatens U.S. economic interests but also complicates international relations and the potential for future trade negotiations. The administration's ability to navigate these tensions while maintaining domestic support will be crucial in the coming months. For long-term economic outlook and business sentiment, the business community is expressing concern over the unpredictability of Trump's tariff policies, with many executives highlighting the potential for significant disruptions to supply chains and profitability. The uncertainty introduced by these policies may hinder long-term investment decisions as companies grapple with the implications of increased costs and potential retaliatory tariffs. Economic forecasts suggest that if inflation rises due to these tariffs, it could stifle economic growth, complicating the administration's efforts to balance trade while promoting domestic manufacturing. The overall sentiment among investors and business leaders will be critical in shaping the economic landscape following the implementation of these tariffs. These points encapsulate the multifaceted implications of Trump's reciprocal tariffs, highlighting the need for a careful evaluation of their economic, political, and global ramifications. 1. Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act 1930. This legislation, enacted in the United States, raised tariffs on numerous imports to protect American industry during the Great Depression. The act resulted in retaliatory tariffs from other countries, contributing to a significant decline in international trade and worsening the economic downturn. Many economists believe this act exacerbated the global economic crisis and is often cited as a cautionary example of protectionist policies. 2. U.S.-China Trade War 2018-present, initiated by the Trump administration. This ongoing trade conflict involves the U.S. imposing tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, citing unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. China responded with its own tariffs on U.S. products. The trade war has had substantial impacts on global supply chains, consumer prices, and the economies of both nations. It serves as a contemporary example of how tariff impositions can escalate into broader economic tensions. 3. The Tariff of Abominations 1828. This was a protective tariff designed to protect industry in the northern United States, which angered southern states reliant on imported goods. The tariff led to a significant political crisis, with South Carolina declaring it null and void within the state, leading to the nullification crisis. This event highlighted the deep sectional divides in the U.S. and demonstrated how tariffs can provoke significant political and social unrest. Future outlook: predictions for U.S. trade policy post-reciprocal tariffs. The recent announcement by President Donald Trump regarding reciprocal tariffs on U.S. trading partners is poised to reshape the economic landscape significantly. As we analyze the implications of this policy, several predictions can be made about the future of U.S. trade relations, the economy, and the global market. 1. Increased economic tensions. The implementation of reciprocal tariffs will likely lead to heightened economic tensions, not only with adversaries like China but also with traditional allies such as Canada and Mexico. Countries affected by these tariffs are expected to retaliate with their own tariffs, potentially spiraling into a trade war. This could result in a more fragmented global trading system, causing uncertainty and increasing costs for businesses and consumers alike. 2. Inflationary pressures. Economists predict that the reciprocal tariffs will drive up the prices of imported goods, which will in turn contribute to inflation. A study indicated that tariffs could raise core inflation by as much as 0.8 percentage points. As the cost of goods rises, consumer purchasing power may diminish, leading to reduced spending and potential economic slowdowns. This inflationary trend could influence the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, making interest rate cuts less likely in the near term. 3. Shifts in supply chains. In response to the new tariff structure, many U.S. companies may look to alter their supply chains to mitigate the financial impact of tariffs. This could involve relocating manufacturing closer to home or diversifying supply sources outside of traditional partner countries. Such shifts may initially be costly but could lead to a more resilient supply chain in the long run. 4. Impact on key industries. Industries heavily reliant on imports, particularly automotive technology and consumer goods, will likely face significant challenges. Companies like Ford and tech giants such as Apple may experience increased costs, which could lead to higher prices for consumers or reduced profit margins. This could also prompt firms to lobby for exemptions or carve-outs to protect their interests, complicating the tariff landscape further. 5. Potential for negotiation and trade agreements. Although the imposition of tariffs signifies a confrontational approach, it may also serve as a bargaining tool for the U.S. in pursuing more favorable trade agreements. The Trump administration might leverage these tariffs to negotiate better terms with other countries, aiming to create a more favorable trading environment for American goods. However, this strategy carries risks, as it may alienate trading partners and lead to prolonged negotiations. 6. Political ramifications. The economic impact of the reciprocal tariffs will also have political consequences. Rising prices and inflation could erode consumer confidence and support for the Trump administration, especially if voters perceive the tariffs as detrimental to their economic well-being. As midterm elections approach, the administration may face backlash from constituents directly affected by these policies. 7. Long-term economic effects. In the longer term, if the tariffs lead to sustained inflation and reduced economic growth, the U.S. economy could enter a period of stagnation characterized by high prices and low growth, often referred to as stagflation. This could alter the economic landscape significantly, with implications for employment, investment, and overall economic stability. 8. Global trade dynamics. The shift toward reciprocal tariffs may encourage other nations to adopt similar measures, fostering a more protectionist global trade environment. Countries may seek to safeguard their industries by imposing tariffs, further complicating international trade agreements and cooperation. This could lead to a world where trade is less free and more regulated, impacting global economic growth. 9. Public sentiment and consumer behavior. Consumer sentiment is likely to shift as a result of the tariffs, with individuals becoming more price-sensitive due to rising costs. This could lead to changes in consumption patterns, with consumers opting for domestic products or cheaper alternatives to mitigate price increases. Retailers may need to adjust their pricing strategies and marketing to align with these consumer preferences. Conclusion. The introduction of reciprocal tariffs by the Trump administration marks a critical juncture in U.S. trade policy, with far-reaching implications for the economy and global trade dynamics. As the U.S. navigates this new landscape, stakeholders must prepare for potential challenges while seeking opportunities for negotiation and adaptation. The coming months will be crucial in determining the effectiveness and repercussions of this approach, shaping the future of international trade relations and the U.S. economy for years to come.